Franz Reichelt. Franz Reichelt was an Austrian-born tailor who had moved to Paris. Passionate about aviation, he became determined to create a wearable parachute suit that could save pilots in emergencies. He constructed a heavy suit weighing about 9 kilograms, with fabric panels intended to spread into wings and slow a fall. Before attempting a human jump, Reichelt tested his design using small mannequins. He dropped them from platforms about 10 to 20 meters high. In each test, the mannequins either fell straight down or tumbled, as the fabric panels failed to open properly. The parachute did not catch air, and the mannequins struck the ground too quickly. Observers noted that the folds twisted or clumped, preventing the canopy from forming. Despite these repeated failures, Reichelt remained convinced that a jump from a greater height would allow the suit to work as intended. On February 4, 1912, he arrived at the Eiffel Tower, still confident in his invention. He wore the full parachute suit, the bulk of the fabric hanging from his shoulders. Reichelt had told authorities he would use a dummy for the test, which is why permission was granted, but he intended to jump himself. Journalists, photographers, and early cinematographers gathered below, ready to document the experiment. Around 7 a.m., Reichelt began the climb to the first platform, approximately 57 meters above the ground. The winter air was cold, the wind light, and the ground frozen. Spectators lined the viewing areas, their attention fixed on the daring experiment. At 8:22 a.m., he stepped onto a small stool positioned near the guardrail. He adjusted the straps and folds of the parachute suit, tugging at the fabric to spread it evenly. He paused briefly, testing his balance and surveying the open space below. Then he leapt. The parachute flared slightly, but the fabric failed to form a full canopy. It bunched around him, offering almost no resistance. Reichelt fell straight down, the suit clinging tightly to his body. The fall lasted approximately 4 seconds. He struck the frozen ground at the base of the tower. The impact was instantaneous and fatal, crushing his skull and breaking his body. The crowd reacted immediately, while journalists and cinematographers captured the entire sequence. Authorities documented the scene, noting the height, fall duration, and failure of the parachute. Newspapers across Paris reported the incident. The failed tests with mannequins and the fatal jump of Reichelt himself served as a stark demonstration of the dangers of untested inventions. Following the tragedy, authorities restricted experimental jumps from the Eiffel Tower. Steve Irwin, known across the globe as the Crocodile Hunter, spent his life working closely with wild animals, often placing himself in risky, sometimes dangerous situations in order to both educate and entertain millions of people. On September 4, 2006, he was filming near Bat Reef, a section of the Great Barrier Reef in Queensland, Australia. The main documentary he had been working on, Ocean's Deadliest, had been delayed due to poor weather conditions. So Steve decided to take the opportunity to film extra segments for his daughter's program, Bindi the Jungle Girl. That afternoon, Steve waded into the shallow waters of the reef with his trusted cameraman to capture additional shots of marine life in their natural environment. While exploring, they came across a large stingray resting quietly on the sandy seabed. Stingrays are usually calm, docile creatures that rarely attack unless they feel provoked or threatened. But Steve positioned himself directly above the animal to secure a better angle for the camera. In doing so, he unintentionally blocked the stingray's only path of escape. Startled and feeling cornered, the stingray reacted defensively. With a sudden powerful motion, it whipped its long tail upward, and the sharp venomous barb struck Steve directly in the chest. The sting pierced his heart with devastating precision. Though he managed to pull the barb out almost immediately, the injury caused massive internal trauma and severe bleeding. His crew quickly rushed to get him back on the boat and attempted frantic resuscitation efforts as they sped toward the shore. Despite their desperate attempts, the injury was instantly fatal, and Steve Irwin was pronounced dead at the age of just 44. His sudden death shocked the entire world, not only because of his immense fame and popularity, but also because it was such a rare and unusual type of accident. Experts later confirmed that if Steve had approached the stingray from the side or simply kept a little more distance instead of swimming directly above it, the animal would have almost certainly swum away peacefully rather than striking. A small change in positioning and a touch more caution in those shallow waters could have prevented the stingray from feeling trapped, and Steve's remarkable life might have been spared. Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman was a beloved comedian and actor, known for his sharp wit and memorable performances on Saturday Night Live. On the night of May 27, 1998, Phil returned to his home in Encino, California. He had spent the evening quietly, unaware of the storm brewing inside his own house. His wife, Bryn Hartman, had a long history of personal struggles and had recently relapsed into substance abuse. The couple had been arguing intermittently over the past weeks, creating a tense and volatile atmosphere within the home. In the early hours of May 28, the neighborhood was silent under a dim streetlight. Inside, Bryn moved through the hallways, her footsteps echoing faintly against the wooden floors. She paced near the bedroom where Phil was resting. In the small, dimly lit room, Phil lay on the bed, exhausted, unaware of the danger moving closer. Personal items like framed photos and scattered clothing filled the space around them, and the faint glow from a nearby lamp highlighted the tension in the air. Bryn entered the bedroom where Phil was asleep. She retrieved a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson Model 15 revolver from a nearby dresser. Without warning, she fired 3 shots at Phil, one between the eyes, one in the throat, and one in the upper chest. Phil was killed instantly, The gunshots echoed through the house and the room was left in sudden deadly silence. After the shooting, Bryn left the Hartman residence and drove to the home of her friend Ron Douglas in Studio City. She confessed to the killing, but Douglas initially did not believe her. Together they returned to the Hartman home. Upon seeing Phil's lifeless body, Douglas called 911 at approximately 6:20 a.m. Los Angeles Police Department officers arrived at the scene and removed the couple's 2 children, Sean and Bergen, from the premises. While the children were escorted to safety, Bryn locked herself in the master bedroom. Shortly thereafter, a single gunshot was heard from inside the room. Bryn had taken her own life using a semi-38 caliber Charter Arms undercover revolver. Police documented the scene. Phil's body lay in the bedroom, Bryn's in a separate room, and bullet casings littered the floors. The investigation concluded that the deaths were the result of domestic conflict, exacerbated by Bryn's substance abuse and emotional instability. The tragedy unfolded rapidly, leaving no opportunity for intervention, and ending the lives of both Phil and Bryn in a sudden, devastating sequence. Isadora Duncan, the world-famous American dancer known as the mother of modern dance, was living in Nice, France at the time of her death. On the evening of September 14, 1927, she accepted a ride in an open-top Amilcar CGSS sports car, driven by her friend Benoit Falchetto. She wore a long, flowing silk scarf, a recent gift from her friend Mary Desty, which she wrapped loosely around her neck and shoulders. At approximately 9:40 p.m., the car began moving slowly along the Promenade des Anglais. Duncan sat in the passenger seat, enjoying the evening air, unaware of the danger that would soon unfold. As the vehicle gained a gentle speed, the end of her silk scarf trailed behind her, fluttering in the wind. Suddenly, the loose fabric made contact with the exposed rear wheel and axle. In an instant, the scarf became entangled in the spokes, wrapping tightly around the hub and brake drum. As the wheel continued to rotate, the scarf pulled taut with violent force, yanking Duncan backward from the seat. The car's momentum caused her body to twist and jerk violently as she was dragged toward the rear of the vehicle. The force of the scarf against her neck caused severe trauma. Duncan was violently thrown onto the pavement. The car continued to move briefly, dragging her slightly along the road before coming to a complete stop. The injuries she sustained were fatal. Bystanders, including Mary Desty, rushed to her side in shock, but it was immediately clear that the trauma was beyond aid. Duncan was transported quickly to a nearby hospital, but doctors pronounced her dead on arrival. She was just 50 years old. The official cause of death was listed as strangulation and a broken neck resulting from the scarf becoming entangled in the car's wheel. Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood was a celebrated American actress, known for her performances in West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause. Born on July 23, 1938, she became one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, and was married to actor Robert Wagner. On the evening of November 28, 1981, Natalie Wood boarded the yacht Splendor. It was 52 feet long. The yacht was anchored near Catalina Island, California. She was accompanied by her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain Dennis Davern. The group spent the night drinking and socializing. Natalie moved between the cabin and deck, talking with Wagner and Walken, while the captain attended to the yacht. During the evening, tensions arose between Wood and Wagner. After a brief disagreement, she left the main cabin, walking toward the open deck to seek space. The yacht had a small dinghy tied alongside, intended for trips to shore. Around 11 p.m., Natalie moved toward the dinghy, possibly preparing to untie it or climb inside. As she handled it, the dinghy rocked in the water against the side of the yacht. She lost her balance and slipped, falling into the cold sea, which measured about 53 Fahrenheit. She was dressed in a blouse, sweater, and jeans, and the heavy clothing combined with alcohol in her system made it almost impossible to stay afloat. Wagner and Walken immediately noticed she was missing. Captain Davern began searching the surrounding water and called out to her, while Wagner and Walken attempted to help, but the dark and cold conditions prevented them from reaching her. The Coast Guard and nearby boats conducted a search throughout the night. Lights swept across the water, and boats moved slowly in the area, but Natalie Wood could not be located. The following morning, November 29, 1981, her body was found floating near the yacht. Rescue personnel recovered her from the water. The official coroner ruled the cause of death as drowning, with alcohol intoxication listed as a contributing factor. Later investigations in 2011-2012 revised the cause to drowning and other undetermined factors, leaving the exact circumstances of her entry into the water unclear. Authorities questioned Wagner and Walken, but no charges were filed. The incident remains a tragic and mysterious event in Hollywood history. Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly, a pioneering figure in early rock and roll, was just 22 years old and already famous for hits like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day. On the night of February 20, 1959, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson arrived at Mason City Municipal Airport in Iowa. The three musicians boarded a small Beechcraft Bonanza, a single-engine aircraft, with pilot Roger Peterson at the controls. Outside, snow was falling lightly, and strong winds swept across the airfield, coating the runway with frost. Shortly after midnight, the plane began its takeoff roll. The wheels accelerated along the icy runway, kicking up snow as it gained speed. The aircraft lifted into the dark winter sky and climbed to approximately 800 feet. The engines roared against the cold night air as the plane moved farther from the airport over the snow-covered fields. As the plane tilted and began to descend, the pilot gripped the yoke tightly, adjusting the controls to counter the gusting winds. The wings shuddered violently, dipping and rising as the aircraft wavered over the dark, frozen landscape. In the small cabin, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson held onto their seats, the engine's roar vibrating through the fuselage. Snow and ice whipped past the windows, partially obscuring the fields below. Instruments rattled and flickered as the plane continued its rapid descent, skimming closer to the icy cornfield with every passing second. In a final violent moment, the nose of the plane slammed into the frozen field. The fuselage shattered instantly, sending metal instruments and personal belongings flying across the snow-covered ground. Emergency responders arrived shortly afterward and documented the crash site. All 4 occupants, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, J.P. Richardson, and Roger Peterson, had died on impact. Investigators later concluded that the accident was caused by poor weather conditions and the pilot's limited training for instrument-only flight. The crash was preventable if the flight had been delayed until daylight, if the musicians had traveled by bus, or if a more experienced pilot had been employed. The tragedy could have been avoided. That night, a single decision ended the lives of 3 rising stars and marked one of the most shocking losses in music history.